Right now, there is a voice inside your head. It speaks every single day. It comments on what you do. It reminds you of your mistakes. It warns you about risks. It tells you when you are not good enough, not ready enough, not capable enough. And most of the time, you trust it. After all, it sounds exactly like you. But what if that voice is not telling you the truth? What if the very voice you rely on to guide your decisions is quietly holding you back from the life you could be living? Think about it. How many opportunities have you avoided because a thought said, "You'll probably fail"? How many ideas did you ignore because something whispered, "You're not the type of person who succeeds"? The truth is unsettling. For millions of people, the most destructive voice they will ever hear is not from critics or society. It is the voice inside their own mind. In this video, we are going to uncover why that voice often lies. We will explore where it comes from. And we will show you how challenging it can completely change the direction of your life. But before we learn how to control it, we must first understand how this voice took control in the first place. Most people believe the voice in their head is simply their own rational thinking. It feels natural. It feels familiar. It feels trustworthy, because it sounds like your own thoughts. But here is the problem. Just because a thought appears in your mind does not mean it is true. Every day, thousands of thoughts pass through your brain. Some are helpful, some are neutral, but a surprising number of them are deeply negative. You may not even notice it anymore. You wake up and think, "I'm already behind," or "I can't handle today." You make a mistake at work and the voice immediately says, "Of course you messed up," or "You always do this." You consider trying something new, starting a business, applying for a better job, or learning a new skill. And the voice quickly whispers, "People like you don't succeed at things like that." The strange part is that most people never question these thoughts. They treat them like absolute facts. Imagine if a stranger followed you around all day. Imagine them saying, "You're probably going to fail," or "You're not smart enough." You would immediately recognize that voice as toxic. You would ignore it. You would walk away. But when those same words appear inside your own mind, you believe them. This is where the real danger begins. Over time, those thoughts slowly shape how you see yourself. They influence the risks you take, the opportunities you pursue, and the dreams you allow yourself to imagine. Without realizing it, many people start living inside the limits created by that voice. They stop trying. They stop growing. They choose safety over possibility. Not because they lack ability, but because the voice in their head has convinced them they do. The most dangerous part is that the voice feels so natural. Most people never realize it might be wrong. To understand why this voice has such power, we need to look deeper. We need to see where it actually comes from. Because this voice was not born with you. It was built, slowly, over many years. Once you understand how it was built, you will finally understand how to take control of it. Let's imagine a simple story. A story that might feel surprisingly familiar. There is a person named Alex. Alex is intelligent. Alex works hard. Friends and colleagues often say Alex has great potential. But Alex carries something invisible everywhere. A voice. Not an actual voice, of course, but a quiet commentary that follows Alex throughout the day. When Alex wakes up, the voice is already there. "You didn't sleep enough. Today is going to be stressful." When Alex thinks about future goals, the voice quickly adds its opinion. "That goal is too big. People like you rarely achieve something like that." At work one day, Alex is sitting in a meeting. An idea comes to mind. For a brief moment, Alex considers sharing it. But before speaking, the voice interrupts. "What if this is a bad idea? What if everyone else already thought of this? What if they think you don't understand the problem?" So Alex stays quiet. A few minutes later, someone else suggests something very similar. Suddenly, everyone in the room nods with approval. The idea is praised. Alex sits there silently, and the voice returns again. See? You should have said something. But you probably would have explained it badly anyway. The voice criticizes when Alex hesitates, and it criticizes when Alex tries. It is always there, always commenting, always judging, always predicting failure before anything even begins. Weeks later, Alex comes across an opportunity. A new job opening at another company. The role is more challenging. The salary is better. It could open the door to a completely new career path. For a moment, Alex feels excited. Possibilities start to appear. But then the voice returns. There will be hundreds of applicants. They are looking for someone more experienced. You are not ready for something like that. Slowly, the excitement fades. Alex closes the application page. Maybe next year. Maybe after gaining more experience. But next year arrives, and the voice says the exact same thing. Years pass like this. Opportunities appear and disappear. Not because Alex lacks intelligence or talent, not even because Alex lacks ambition, but because the voice in the mind quietly decides what feels possible and what feels impossible. Here is the surprising truth. Alex is not unusual. Millions of people around the world are living a very similar story. They have ideas they never share, dreams they never pursue, opportunities they slowly walk away from, all because of a voice that constantly questions their ability and their potential. Most people don't realize what is happening. They believe the voice is simply being realistic. They call it caution. They call it being practical. But in reality, that voice is doing something very different. It is not protecting them. It is limiting them. When that voice becomes strong enough, it shapes the direction of a person's entire life. So where does this voice actually come from? Why does the human mind produce thoughts that doubt us and sabotage our success? To answer that, we need to understand something fascinating about the human brain. The voice in your head is not random. It has a very specific origin. Once you understand where it comes from, you will see your thoughts in a completely different way. To understand the voice inside your head, we must first understand the brain. Your brain was not designed to make you happy. It was designed to help you survive. For most of human history, survival was extremely difficult. Early humans lived in environments filled with constant danger, harsh weather, and frequent food shortages. In those conditions, optimism was not the safest strategy. Caution was. Over thousands of years, the human brain adapted to survive these dangers. Psychologists call this adaptation a negativity bias. This means the brain naturally pays more attention to potential threats than positive possibilities. Imagine two early humans walking through a forest. One hears a sound in the bushes and assumes it is just the wind. The other assumes it might be a predator and immediately becomes alert. Which one is more likely to survive? The cautious one. Because of this evolutionary history, the human brain became extremely skilled at scanning the environment for danger. Modern life is much safer than ancient environments. But the same threat detection system is still active inside our minds. Today, the threats are simply different. Instead of predators, the brain worries about rejection, failure, embarrassment, uncertainty, and criticism from others. Whenever you consider taking a risk, speaking up in a meeting, starting a project, or pursuing a dream, the brain automatically runs threat simulations. It asks protective questions. What if this goes wrong? What if people judge you? What if you fail? The voice in your head is often the result of this protective system. Its intention is not to sabotage you. Its intention is to protect you from pain. But the brain frequently overestimates danger. When that happens, the voice begins to sound less like a protector and more like a harsh critic. Another powerful factor also shapes this inner voice. Conditioning. From the moment we are born, our minds absorb messages from the world around us. Parents, teachers, cultural expectations, and social experiences all leave lasting impressions. Some of those messages are encouraging, but many of them are limiting. A child might repeatedly hear phrases like, "Be careful," "Don't take unnecessary risks," "That is too difficult," You should be realistic. Over time, these external voices slowly become internal voices. The brain records them. Eventually, the mind begins repeating them automatically. What once came from the outside now feels like it comes from within. Psychologists call this process internalization. It is how external beliefs slowly become personal beliefs. The voice in your head may sound like your own thinking, but very often it is an echo of past experiences. A teacher who criticized you, a moment when you failed publicly, or a comment from someone who doubted your ability. The brain stores those memories as warnings. When you approach a similar situation again, the mind tries to protect you by reminding you of past pain. There is one more fascinating trait of the human brain. The brain prefers certainty over possibility. Uncertainty requires energy. It forces the mind to imagine new outcomes and step into unfamiliar situations. But the brain is also designed to conserve energy whenever possible, so it encourages you to stay inside what is familiar, even if that familiar place is not where you truly want to be. This is why the inner voice often says things like, "Stay where you are, don't risk embarrassment, this is safer." From the brain's perspective, the comfort zone reduces risk, but from the perspective of personal growth, it prevents progress. The voice inside your head is not evil. It is simply the result of evolution, conditioning, and the brain's desire for certainty. Understanding this changes everything. Because once you see the origin of that voice, you realize it is not always a reliable guide. It is a survival mechanism, and survival mechanisms are designed to keep you safe, not necessarily to help you reach your highest potential. The real skill is learning when to listen to that voice and when to question it. Because if you never question it, the voice quietly limits what you believe is possible. The real danger is not that the voice exists. The real danger is believing that every thought it produces is true. And in the next section, we will explore what happens when people begin believing that voice without question. Here is where things become truly important. Having an inner voice is completely normal, and every human being experiences it. The problem is not the voice itself. The problem begins when people start believing every thought it produces. When thoughts are treated as facts, they slowly begin shaping the direction of a person's life. Most of the time, this happens quietly and almost invisibly. The voice rarely stops you in dramatic ways. It doesn't shout, "You cannot do this." Instead, it whispers. It introduces hesitation and creates small doubts that slowly influence your decisions. A person might decide not to speak up during a meeting because the voice says someone else probably knows better. Another person might consider starting a project they have dreamed about for years, but the voice quietly says, "You might fail." So the idea is postponed. Someone else may want to change careers or start a business, but the voice reminds them of uncertainty and asks, "What if it doesn't work?" Slowly, they choose safety instead of possibility. These choices often feel reasonable in the moment. They feel cautious, responsible, and practical. But over time, opportunities quietly pass by. Confidence slowly weakens. The person begins believing they are less capable than they actually are. Not because reality proved it, but because the voice repeated the same message often enough. Psychologists refer to this pattern as self-limiting beliefs. When a thought is repeated again and again, the brain eventually treats it as part of your identity. Instead of thinking, "This task is difficult," the voice changes the message to, "I am not the kind of person who can do this." That small shift changes everything. Once a belief becomes part of your identity, it begins shaping your behavior automatically. You start avoiding challenges. You hesitate before opportunities, and you begin underestimating your own abilities. Very often, this becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. Imagine someone who believes they are bad at public speaking. Because of that belief, they avoid situations where they might need to speak. Since they rarely practice, their skill never improves. And when they finally have to speak, they struggle. That struggle then reinforces the original belief. "See, I knew I wasn't good at this." The voice inside their mind feels validated, But the truth is very different. The problem was never their ability. The problem was the belief that prevented them from practicing. This same pattern appears in many areas of life. People underestimate their intelligence, their creativity, and their ability to learn new skills. Because of that, they build smaller lives than they are capable of living, all because a voice convinced them their potential was limited. But here is the powerful realization. Thoughts are not commands, thoughts are not predictions, and most importantly, thoughts are not facts. They are simply mental events that appear and disappear inside the mind. Yet many people treat them as absolute truth. Imagine believing every advertisement you see, or believing every rumor you hear. Life would quickly become confusing. But when it comes to their own thoughts, people often do exactly that. They accept the voice inside their mind without questioning it. But the moment you begin questioning that voice, everything starts to change. Because the real breakthrough happens when you realize something simple but powerful. You are not the voice in your head. You are the one who hears it. And once you understand that distinction, you gain something incredibly valuable. The ability to choose which thoughts deserve your attention, and which ones should simply be ignored. At some point in life, many people experience a quiet but powerful realization, a realization that changes how they see their own mind. The realization is simple but profound. The voice inside your head is not actually you. It may sound like you. It may use your language and comment on your life with complete confidence, but the voice itself is simply a stream of thoughts moving through your mind. And something even more interesting is happening. If you can hear that voice, there must be another part of you that is listening. Think about that for a moment. Every time a thought appears in your mind, you are aware of it. You notice it. You observe it. That awareness is different from the thought itself. The voice speaks, but something within you is quietly watching. Psychologists describe this as the difference between the thinking mind and the observing mind. The thinking mind produces thoughts constantly. Ideas, worries, memories, and judgments flow through the mind all day long. But the observing mind simply notices those thoughts. It watches them appear and it watches them disappear. When people first realize this distinction, something powerful begins to happen. They start understanding that not every thought deserves to be believed. Imagine sitting beside a busy road. Cars pass by continuously. You see them and hear them, but you do not feel the need to chase every single car. Thoughts work in a very similar way. They pass through the mind. Some are useful, some are meaningless, and some are simply wrong. But many people spend their entire lives chasing every thought that appears. They argue with those thoughts. They obey them, and very often they believe them. Without realizing, they always had another option. They could simply observe the thought and let it pass. This insight creates an important shift in perspective. Instead of saying, "I am not good enough," a person begins to notice the thought differently. They say, "I am noticing a thought that says I am not good enough." That small change in perspective creates distance, and distance creates freedom. Because once you recognize that thoughts are simply events in the mind, you gain the ability to respond differently. You can question the thought, you can challenge it, you can ignore it, or you can replace it with something more helpful. The voice in your head may continue speaking, but it no longer has complete control. And that is the turning point. Because once you understand that you are not the voice in your head, you begin to realize something deeply empowering. You can train the way you respond to it. Understanding the inner voice is powerful. But understanding alone is not enough. Thought patterns are habits of the mind. And like any habit, they can be changed through practice. The goal is not to eliminate the voice completely. That would be impossible. The real goal is to change the way you respond to it. Here are 5 practical steps that can help you regain control. Step 1. Learn to notice the voice. The first step is simple, but surprisingly powerful. Start noticing when the inner voice appears. Most people live their entire lives reacting to thoughts automatically. A thought appears, and they immediately believe it. But when you begin observing your thoughts, something important changes. The next time a negative thought appears, pause for a moment. Instead of reacting immediately, simply notice the thought. You might say to yourself, "That is an interesting thought." Or you might say, "My mind is telling me something again." That small pause creates awareness, and awareness weakens the automatic power of the voice. Step 2. Question the thought. Once you notice the voice, the next step is to question it. Remember, the brain often exaggerates threats. Many of the thoughts it produces are not accurate predictions. When the voice says, "You will probably fail," ask yourself a simple question. Is that actually true? Very often, the honest answer is, "I don't know." The mind tends to jump to negative conclusions without evidence. By questioning the thought, you interrupt that automatic process. You begin treating thoughts like hypotheses, not facts. Step 3. Replace the narrative. Once you challenge the thought, introduce a more balanced perspective. This does not mean forcing unrealistic positivity. It simply means replacing destructive thoughts with constructive ones. Instead of thinking, "I am not good enough for this opportunity," you might say, "I may not know everything yet, but I can learn." Instead of thinking, "I always fail," you might say, "Sometimes things don't work out, but that is part of learning." The goal is not perfection. The goal is mental balance. Over time, these new thoughts begin forming new patterns in the brain. Step 4. Act before the voice stops you. Here is something fascinating about the inner critic. Its power is usually strongest before you begin something. The voice predicts problems and creates hesitation. But once action begins, reality replaces imagination. The brain starts focusing on solving real problems, instead of imagining worst-case scenarios. So take small action quickly. If the voice says, "You are not ready," take the first step anyway. Action weakens fear, and repeated action gradually retrains the brain. Step 5. Train the voice through repetition. The final step is consistency. The voice in your head was built through years of repeated thoughts. Changing it also requires repetition. Each time you notice the voice, question it, and take action anyway, you send a new signal to the brain. You teach the mind that the old patterns are no longer necessary. Over time, the voice that once doubted you begins to soften. It becomes less dominant and less convincing. Eventually, a different voice begins to appear. A voice that quietly says, "Maybe this is possible." That new voice is the result of training your mind to think differently. And the more you practice, the stronger that voice becomes. Until one day, the voice that once held you back no longer controls your decisions. The voice inside your head will never completely disappear. Thoughts will continue to come and go, just like waves in the ocean. Some will encourage you, and some will doubt you. But the most important realization is this: you do not have to believe every thought that appears in your mind. The voice may speak with confidence, but confidence does not always mean truth. Every great achievement in human history required someone to ignore a voice that said something was impossible. Every entrepreneur, scientist, and artist has faced the same inner critic. The difference is simple. They chose not to let that voice make their decisions. Your life is not defined by the thoughts that appear in your mind. Your life is defined by the actions you choose to take despite those thoughts. And once you learn to question that voice, you reclaim something powerful: your freedom to grow, your freedom to try, and your freedom to become more than the limits your mind once imagined. If you found this video valuable, please take a moment to support the channel. Producing these videos takes many hours of research, writing, and thoughtful preparation. We do this so each episode brings meaningful insights that can improve the way we think and live. If you enjoyed this content, please like the video and share it with someone who might benefit from it. and subscribe to Wealth Waves for more ideas on mindset, discipline, and financial intelligence. Before you go, take a moment to reflect on one simple question. What is one thought you have been believing that you should start questioning today? Because sometimes the most powerful change in life begins with a single new thought, and that thought might just be the beginning of a completely new direction.